We all know who the Vikings are. Bearded, screaming ruffians, leaping from their longboats with axes held above their horn helmets as they pillage the nearest monastery, grab some plunder, and then sail off into the sunset. It is an egregious stereotype, and it's also completely untrue. Here's why everything you think you know about the Vikings is wrong, and why Vikings didn't even exist. Let's start with the horned helmets. The Vikings didn't wear them. So this is completely apocryphal. Nothing like this has ever been found in any archaeological dig. Now the Vikings did wear helmets, they just didn't have horns, because a helmet with horns was absolutely useless if an enemy warrior tried to strike at you with a sword or an axe. Just watch. Useless. So where does this myth of the horned helmet come from? The blame rests with pop culture, but we're talking the pop culture of the 19th century. Yep, 1800s German opera. It stems from Richard Wagner's Ring Cycle, a series of 4 operas based on figures from German and Norse sagas. Wagner didn't write in the horned helmets. Those are courtesy of the costume designer, Carl Emil Doppler. He added those in the 1870s for the Norse characters, and so the myth was born. Cartoonists, animators, illustrators have been propagating that myth ever since. The Vikings earned their ferocious reputation due to their frequent raids on vulnerable monastic sites. Populated by scribes, these were one of the worst places to attack if you wanted a good rep in the annals of history. Take this letter written by the 8th century scholar Lochun of York.
Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heathens poured out the blood of saints around the altar and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets.
Not a good look, historically speaking. But while some Vikings deserved their mantle as wolves of war, others lived much more peaceful existences, farming, trading, integrating into the lands that they settled. And what we forget is that violence was inflicted by other groups during this period as much as by the Vikings themselves. Take Charlemagne, King of the Franks turned Holy Roman Emperor, one of the most famous names of the period. He was the perpetrator of the massacre of Verdun in AD 782, in which his army slaughtered 4,500 Saxons. And yet because he was killing pagans, his name was safe in Christian hands. One instance that did involve the Vikings directly was the St. Brice's Day massacre of AD 1002. Now this is when Ethelred II of England ordered the slaughter of all of the Vikings within his lands. It gave rise to Ethelred's unflattering sobriquet, the Unready, meaning ill-advised, and it prompted the Viking invasion of England that first put Sven Forkbeard on the throne and later his son, Canute the Great. Now, those slaughtered during the St. Brice's Day massacre were settlers, and this gives rise to another problem with the word Viking. Not everyone was a raider, and not all raiders were raiders all the time. To boil the Vikings down to a single act, albeit a significant one, was to do them a huge disservice. Now it's a well and good saying the Vikings didn't wear horned helmets, and the Vikings weren't all bloodthirsty reavers. But how can we say that when there's no such thing as Vikings?
What? The
term Viking comes from the Old Icelandic Vikinga, meaning a creek dweller. The Viken was a primarily mercantile region of Norway, so it's entirely possible this apparently homogeneous group of people, the Vikings, gained their name from the trading they carried out there. Now it gets more complicated because the word Viking later becomes synonymous with the act of going on a naval raid, and this is when it starts to function as less of a noun and more of a verb. Individuals or groups would go a Viking. They would leave their homes in the warmer summer months, heading to lands in their longboats where they could trade and raid. And so here we are, back to our stereotype of bearded berserkers brutalising monks. Yet for all that ill feeling, not even the Christian scribes recording those raids would have described these warriors as Vikings. They might have called them pagans, heathens, Norsemen, but never Vikings. That word really gains traction in the 19th century, actually around the time that Wagner's operas gave us the horned helmet. But if you happen to be dropped in the 9th century AD and met someone who is from what is now Scandinavia and said, "Hey, you're a Viking," they would have absolutely no idea what you were talking about. Just as there were no Vikings, there was also no Viking Age, or at least not one that is easily agreed on. The most common dates for the Viking Age have it starting with a raid on Lindisfarne in AD 793 and ending in 1066 with the death of Harold Hardrada just a few weeks before the Battle of Hastings. But that is an extremely Anglo-centric way to think about things. Evidence of Scandinavian expansion has been found dating to half a century earlier than the raid on Lindisfarne, including, in AD 750, the remains of ship burials on the island of Saaremaa in modern-day Estonia. These revealed that Vikings from the area near modern Stockholm had attempted to engage on diplomatic and trading missions in Eastern Europe, only to meet a violent end. At the other end of the purported Viking Age, the death of Harold Hardrada in 1066 marked the end of the large-scale Norse invasions of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. It was a fitting full stop as far as England was concerned. Away on the continent, however, Viking activity continued, and the picture gets even murkier with the Vikings who ventured into what is now parts of modern Russia and modern Ukraine, settlers who eventually became the Kievan Rus. Yes, the Vikings raided. Yes, they plundered. And yes, they took those ill-gotten gains and sailed away. But that's only part of the story. They also established major settlements far from home. Take Dublin, founded by the Vikings in AD 841. Under their rule, it grew into a bustling port with its own mint. Under the Vikings, York, which they renamed Yorvik, became a thriving town in northern England. Even Normandy in France gets its name from the Vikings, who were known there as Northmen. In a bid to avoid more raids, King Charles the Simple of West Francia gave that land, along with his daughter's hand in marriage, to the Viking chieftain Rollo. The Vikings who settled there adopted French language and customs, becoming the people we know as the Normans. And the Normans succeeded where their Viking forebears could not, conquering England in 1066. The problem with calling Vikings godless pagans is they were given that name by Christian scribes, the same scribes who suffered during raids on monasteries like Lindisfarne. One worries they might not have been entirely objective. They didn't build elaborate temples like Christian cathedrals, but had sacred groves and rivers. Like other polytheistic religions of the time, they had structured rites and hierarchies, with even kings sometimes acting as priests. Much of what we know about Viking religion comes from archaeology and later Norse texts. Their belief system was rich in gods, giants, and different realms. Now, the realm we live on was Midgard. The realm of the gods, Asgard, was the home of Odin, Thor, Loki, and the like. And the one place that all Viking warriors on Midgard wanted to get to was Valhalla, Odin's hall in Asgard, where they would feast and fight until the end of days. Ragnarok. So there you have it. The Vikings didn't wear horned helmets. They weren't mindless barbarians. And the people we think of as Vikings wouldn't have known themselves as Vikings at all. And if you want more facts like this, head over to HistoryExtra.com.